Hello everyone, welcome back to this video lecture series on the subject English for Skill Enhancement. Today we will be discussing about sentences, different kinds of sentences in English. I am Arif Ahammed. I teach English in the Department of HNS, MLR Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. So let's see what is the overview of today's lecture, what are the aspects that we are going to cover in today's lecture. The first thing I will be talking about is definition of a sentence. So this is the very basic thing. First we will be talking about what is the definition of a sentence, and then we would be discussing about key components of a sentence that will help us to understand the definition in a much better manner. And then we would also be talking about different types of sentences, types as per their function as well as per their structure, and also would be seeing the usage of different kinds of sentences. So let's move to the next main part of the presentation, that is definition of a sentence, which is the first segment of today's lecture. What is the definition of a sentence? So how would you normally define a sentence? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when I use the word sentence? So group of words. Like sentence is nothing but group of words, and then also another part is complete thought. It should convey a complete thought. So when few words come together and they convey a complete thought, we can call them a sentence. So what are the elements of a sentence? What are the components of a sentence? You can see that there are different things, like different components in a sentence. The first thing is subject. Subject means what that subject means the person, thing that we talk about in a sentence, right? So that is the subject, and also a predicate. Now what is a predicate? Predicate is nothing but verb plus object. So something more about the subject. Now, so because there is a confusion between sentence and phrase, they are not same things. We should also have an idea about what is a phrase, just to get our understanding more clear about a sentence. So what is a phrase? Phrase is also a group of words. Sentence also is a group of words. That's where the confusion actually arises. Both are same. But then a sentence always expresses or conveys a complete thought. On the other hand, a phrase is a group of words. It also can convey a thought, complete thought. But what you have to look in, it doesn't contain both subject and verb together. So this pair you won't find in a phrase. You can either find a subject or you can either find a verb individually, but they won't be together in a phrase. So that is the basic difference between phrase and sentence. Please understand that. Sentence is also group of words, phrase also group of words. Sentence can convey a complete thought, phrase also can convey a complete thought. But in phrase, you won't find subject and verb together. In sentence, you will always find a subject and a verb. So that is the basic difference. Now, what is the role? We form sentence by following certain grammatical rules, and for which purpose? In order to convey a statement, or in order to give a statement, or in order to question, or in order to exclaim something, or in order to command or request something, right? So these are the purpose of sentences. We use sentences basically for these reasons, for these purposes. And then it must have at least one independent clause. So a sentence should at least have one independent clause which contains a subject and a verb, right? So that is also the minimum requirement of a sentence. A sentence can have multiple clauses, that is fine, but one clause must be an independent clause. If there is not even one single independent clause, you cannot call it as a sentence. So these are the basic things that we need to know about sentences. So what we could understand here, that in order to understand sentence in a better manner, we should have idea about what is phrase and also clause, right? So phrase is fine, because we need to know about phrase just to understand the difference between phrase and clause. But if we want to know about different types of sentences, then we must know about this clause in detail. And we will see how clause is related to sentence. We will get to know the subsequent part of the lecture. So let's see key components of a sentence. So let's discuss about the key component of a sentence. I already told that a sentence consists of a subject and predicate. Predicate is like verb plus object, you can see here. So What is subject? The person, place, thing or idea that we talk about, like that the sentence is about. So the main subject of the sentence, you say. And then predicate. What is predicate? The part of the sentence that tells something about the subject, usually containing a verb. So this is called predicate. So predicate part will always have a verb, and it always will talk about, it will give some extra details about the subject. So you can see here an example. Birds fly in the sky. This is a complete sentence. Now you can see birds, they are the subject of the sentence. Why? Because we are talking about birds in this sentence. And then the next part is a predicate. Predicate contains, you can see verb is there and then object is there. So this is object, this is subject, this is predicate. In predicate you can find verb and as well as the object. Fine. So this is the basic structure of sentence. Now types of sentences as a function, like different types of sentences are there. They actually complete different kinds of functions. So let's see what are the types according to their function. So you can see declarative sentence. We get declarative sentences. So what is the function of declarative sentences? We declare some fact by using declarative sentences. So what are the fact? You can see the example. The sun rises in the east. So what I am doing here, I am simply stating a fact. This is called declarative sentence. She enjoys reading books. Here also what I am doing, I am just simply stating a fact. So it is nothing but a declarative sentence. Similarly, there are interrogative sentences. What are interrogative sentences? You can see question. So they are very easy to identify. You will always find this mark, right? So in order to question something, we use this kind of sentences. So where are you going? Did you complete your assignment? You can see all these are questions. I am asking questions by using them. So that's why they are interrogative sentence. Imperative sentences are there. Imperative sentences what? Like we use them in order to command or request. So if we have to give order or you have to request, we normally use or we usually use imperative sentence. See the example here, close the door. So what I am giving a command here, or I am ordering someone to close the door. So this is again an imperative sentence. Please pass me the salt. Here what I am doing, I am making a request. I am a little more polite here. So because I want something, so obviously I have to be polite. Otherwise I won't get the salt, right? So what I am doing here, I am making a request. So these are examples of imperative sentence. Now exclamatory sentence also is there. Fourth type of sentences as per function. So what they do, they express strong emotions. So whenever we want to express our strong emotions, not simple emotions, strong emotions, we always use these kind of sentences. What are they? Exclamatory sentences. You can see example, what a beautiful painting. Then this mark you would find always in exclamatory marks. I can't believe we won the match. Here also again you can see the mark. And these are all example of exclamatory sentence. So basically there are four types of sentences as per their function. When it comes to function, what are they? They are declarative sentence, the first one you can see, and then interrogative sentence. Next one is imperative sentence, and then last one is exclamatory sentences. So this is one important thing that you need to remind. But you see, if you want to improve your writing or your sentence structure, what happens? Only having knowledge about functional type of sentences will not be enough. You need to know about other types of sentences also that is being defined as per their structure. Right? So let's see what are those sentences. Now types of sentences based on structure, you see. Now types of sentences as per their structure are determined by the number and nature of clauses. So that's why I was talking about clause, if you remember in the first slide, right, or second slide. Clause is very important. Why? Because it's actually the number of clauses or the nature of clauses, what kind of clauses we are talking about. According to that, we decide the type of sentence, like what types of sentence it is as per the structure. So that's why, hence we must first know what is a clause and what are the types of clauses. So because types of sentence depends on a number of clauses and types of clauses, we need to know first what is a clause and what are the different types of clauses. Fine. So let's move to the next slide. Let's come to this part, clause. What is a clause? Now what is a clause? A clause refers to a group of sentence or group of related words, sorry, not group of sentences, group of related words within a sentence or itself as an independent sentence which has both subject and predicate. So the basic requirement of a clause is it must have a subject and predicate. Predicate means verb plus object. So basically subject plus verb. Sometimes object might not be there in a sentence. So subject plus verb. This is the basic minimum requirement for a clause. They must be present in pair. Both subject and verb has to be present in that group of words, right? So, and you have to observe here one thing, that sometime what happen with it can exist as a complete sentence, like as an independent sentence, or sometimes it can also exist as not as an independent sentence but group, as a clause. Now see the example here, I am happy. You can see this is a clause, independent clause. Why I am saying it's a clause? First let's see why I am calling it a clause, because it's a group of related words. There are 3 words, they are interrelated, and also you can find the pair, right? Subject plus verb, S and V. That's why I am terming it as a clause. Now let's see what kind of clause it is. I can call it as an independent clause. Why? Because it can stand also as an independent sentence. It is perfectly fine, right? It is conveying a complete thought as an independent sentence. So that's why it's an independent sentence also, or independent clause. But let's come here. Here also you can see this is a clause, right? Because this is a group of words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words are there. They are interrelated. You can also find a subject and also a verb. Both are there. So this is also a clause. But then is it an independent sentence or an independent clause? No, because this alone is not conveying any thought. If I only say because I own a prize, you might be waiting for the next part of the sentence, or you might understand it clearly that there is something else that I have to tell in order to complete the sentence. So it's not a complete sentence. It is not independent. It depends on other part of the sentence, right? So that is very important. Now, I hope you understood the basic definition of clause. Now let's see, we'll be talking about types of clauses also, because it is the type of clauses and number of clauses that decide the type of sentences, right? So see, first is main or independent clause. So what is a main clause or independent clause? It's a clause that expresses a complete thought and can stand as a sentence. So it is not depending, it will not depend on other part of the sentence. An independent clause itself will work as a complete sentence, and it can convey a complete meaning. So that is that's why it's called independent. It is not dependent on anything else. The other kind of clauses or other types of clauses, subordinate or dependent clause. Now, from the name you can understand dependent clause means it will depend on something else, some other part of the sentence. So it's a clause which does not express complete thought. So this is one requirement. It can never express a complete thought. And what is the next requirement? It depends on another clause to express complete thought. So obviously, because it's a clause, you will find subject and verb here also, subject and verb. But then it will not be able to convey a complete thought in its own. In order to give a complete meaning or complete sense, it has to depend on other part of a sentence. Like mostly it would be depend on another clause. So you can see the example here. I am happy because I own a prize. So if you take it as a complete sentence, I am happy, comma, because I own a prize. Now how many clauses you can find? You can find there are 2 clauses. Why? Because you can find 2 subject plus verb pairing here, right? Subject plus verb. Here also you can find subject plus verb. But see this part, I am happy. If you see this clause, this is conveying a complete thought. It is not depending on any other part. Even if I remove this entire thing, I am happy is a sentence in its own, right? There is no problem. So that's why it's called IC, independent clause, right? But on the other hand, if you focus on the second part, second clause, you can see because I own a prize. If you focus only in this part, what is happening here? It's a clause obviously, because you can find here a subject as well as a verb. But then is it an independent clause? No. Why? Because it's not conveying a complete thought. It will not be able to stand in its own as a independent sentence, right? If I only say because I own a prize, you will definitely look for this other part. So it's not complete in its own. It is depending on this part. That's why this is called a dependent clause. So I hope it is clear now what is independent clause and what is dependent clause. Please do understand that you need to have a clear understanding about what is independent clause and what is dependent clause. Based on that only you would be able to identify or formulate different kind of sentences as per their structure. So yes, we got to know about dependent clause and independent clause. Now we will see different types of sentences based on their structure, right? So the first one is a simple sentence. So you must be very happy listening to the word simple, because it, you are assuming that simple sentence means something that is very simple and all. But that's actually not the case. It's simple sentence because of the structure. Now, why it is called simple? Because it contains only one independent clause. You are dealing with only one clause in a simple sentence. So that's why it's an simple sentence. So you can see the example here. He plays football. I am happy. He likes chocolate, for example. Who is your favorite author? It's a question. But these are all containing what? One independent clause, one single independent clause. I see. And that's why they are known as simple sentence. But you can see the last sentence here. Do not assume that a long sentence cannot be a simple sentence, right? A long sentence is a pretty long sentence also can be a simple sentence. You cannot judge the types of sentences by looking at the length of the sentence. That's what I wanted to say with this example. She ate her lunch, took a walk, and went back to work. You can see it's a pretty big sentence, right? But then you cannot call it as a simple sentence. Why? Because this contains only one independent clause. There are more than one verb form, but they are compound verb. These are all being done by one single subject. So they are compound verb. They are not different verbs. Or those actions are not being performed by different subjects. All are being performed by one single subject. That's why there is one single independent clause is there, because there is one subject and this subject is performing all these actions. So these are compound verbs. So that's why this is an example of simple sentence. So what is the simple formula? Simple sentence is equal to one IC, one independent clause. So I hope it is clear. But now let's see different next kind of sentences, that is compound sentence. So what is compound sentence? You might have heard this particular term compound in mathematics, right? Compound means something added up. When we add up certain things, they become compound. Now see the definition of compound sentence. A compound sentence contains two or more independent clause and two or more independent clause, okay, and clauses. So you can find a compound sentences will contain two independent clauses. Sometimes it can be more than two also, right? And another important thing you need to know about compound sentences, those clauses would be joined by coordinating conjunction or semicolon. Now, what are the coordinating conjunction is very easy to understand, because there are only 7. You can remember them with this thing, fanboys. So what is fanboys? You can see F for, A for and, N for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, and so last one. So these are example of coordinating conjunction, and they are used to do what? To join two independent clauses. So what is the definition of a compound sentence? Compound sentence will have two independent clauses, minimum two independent clauses, and they would be joined by either a coordinating conjunction. Sometimes we don't use conjunction, we can use semicolon also. For example, you can see here this sentence, he studied hard, semicolon, he passed the exam with flying colors. So actually these are two independent clauses. Now what is happening? I am not using a coordinating conjunction, I am simply putting a colon here, semicolon. So semicolon also can be used to join two independent clause, right? So you see the other example, she wanted to go on a vacation, comma, so she saved up her money. You can see I like cricket, but my sister loves chess. So you can find here what is happening, two independent clause. I like cricket is one independent clause. Why? Because you can find one subject, one verb, this pair is there, so it's a clause. What kind of clause it is? Because it's an independent clause. Because I like cricket is completely conveying a thought. It is not depending on any other part of the sentence. On the other hand, my sister loves chess. This is also conveying a complete sentence, right? So that's why two independent clause you are joining by what? A coordinating conjunction. But is an example of coordinating conjunction you can find. So that's why they are known as compound sentences. You can see why I said that minimum two independent clauses, because sometimes there might be more than two independent clauses also in a compound sentence. You can see here, she loves reading, comma, her brother enjoys painting. Two independent clauses. Now I am putting a comma in between them, and then I am joining this independent clause and this independent clause by using but. So this is also an example of compound sentence with more than one or more than two independent clauses. Fine. So I hope this is clear. Simple sentence was one single independent clause. What is compound sentence? Minimum two independent clauses. Now let's see next kind of sentences, that is complex sentence. So from the name itself you can see it's a little complex. It's not as simple, right? So what is a complex sentence? A complex sentence contains one independent clause and at least one or more dependent clause. So the minimum requirement, you know that the minimum requirement of a sentence is it must have a independent clause. Then only it can be considered as a sentence. So what is the requirement of complex sentence? One independent clause must be there. Along with that one independent clause, IC, there must be at least one dependent clause, DC. Minimum one, it can be more than one also. But minimum requirement is one DC, one dependent clause. Okay, so DC means subordinate. And how they would be joined? Because there would be two different clauses. They would always be joined by a subordinating conjunction. And there are many subordinating conjunctions. Like apart from those 7, all other connecting words, they are known as subordinating conjunction. You can see although, even though, because, there are many examples. So you can see the example here. Although it was raining, we went for a walk. So can you identify here? Just pause the video for a few seconds and try to identify the clauses present in this sentence. Yes. So let's see what are the clauses. How many clauses are there? In first place, 2 clauses. One is because it was, you see, subject and verb pair is there. Here also we went, subject and verb pair is there. So 2 clauses you can find. Now what kind of clauses they are? We went for a walk, it's an independent clause, right? You can easily understand because it can stand in its own. It is not depending on this part of the sentence. But let's take this part of the sentence. If you see here, this part, although it was raining, it will not convey the complete thoughts. You know that I cannot only say although it is raining. I have to say something else also to give the complete meaning, to, form the complete sense. That's why it's a dependent clause. So what is happening here? One dependent clause, one independent clause, they are being joined by one subordinating conjunction, right? So that's why it's an example of complex sentence. So I hope it is clear now. So what is complex sentence? Complex sentence means one independent clause would be there, and along with that one independent clause, what will happen? At least one or more dependent clause. Minimum one or more than one dependent clause would be there. That is the definition of complex sentence. Fine. So compound sentence, simple sentence. What is simple sentence? You can see what is simple sentence. Only one IC would be there, right? Now what is compound sentence? Minimum 2 IC plus IC. And what is complex sentence now? 1 IC plus minimum 1 DC. It can be more than 1 also. Here also it can be more than 1. So this is the complex sentence. Now let's move to the next kind of sentences, that is the compound complex sentence. So from name itself you can see it's a combination of both compound and complex. Obviously it's going to be little more complicated, probably the most complicated one, and normally we don't use this kind of sentences because they sometimes can create confusion. Right? So we avoid normally in writing or speaking. But let's see what is the definition of compound and complex sentence. It's a combination of both compound sentence forms and complex sentence form, right? A compound complex sentence contains at least 2 independent clauses and at least 1 dependent clause. So 2 IC would be there here. 2 independent clause would be there plus minimum 1 dependent clause, at least 1 dependent clause. So this is called compound and complex sentence. So you can see here, although it was raining, we went to the park and we played cricket. So you can see here, so minimum requirement, you can see you can find minimum 3 clauses would be there. Out of that, 2 would be independent and 1 would be dependent. So now let's pause the video and try to find out what are the 3 clauses in this sentence first, and then which clause is independent and which one is dependent, right? So let's see. Here you can see, first let's identify the clauses. So this is one clause, you can see it was subject verb is there. We went to the park, this is one clause because subject and verb is there. And then we played cricket, this is also another clause. So 3 clauses. Now, what are the independent clauses? We played cricket. This is one independent clause because it can stand in its own as a complete sentence. We went to the park also can stand in its own as independent sentence. Then, although it was raining. Here, if I say only, although it was raining, it is not conveying a complete sense. You know that it has to depend on the other part of the sentence to convey a complete meaning. So that's why it's a dependent. It's an example of DC, dependent clause. So you can see 2 independent clause, 1 true and 1 DC, minimum 1 DC, that is raining. So that is the basic definition of compound complex sentence. So please remember, for your understanding, you should have an idea about what is compound complex sentence and their structure examples. But it's better to avoid them in writings or sentences, because sometimes, or most of the time to be precise, they create confusion. So it's better to avoid this. Now let's see why do we need these different kinds of sentences. Only simple sentences should have been enough, right? Why do we need again compound complex, all those kind of sentences? So let's see. That is because of the functional purpose of each type of sentences. So each of these kind of sentences, they have a particular function. So for example, if you look at the functions of simple sentences, when do we use simple sentences? To declare a direct statement. If we are talking about a direct statement, this conclusion is supported by extensive evidence. You can see what I am doing here. I am just declaring. I am stating a fact here, or I am declaring something. So that's why it's an example of, it's a simple sentence. I have to use a simple sentence to express this kind of idea. I want to display a simple list. Then also, the researcher created their hypothesis, conducted some tests and drew their conclusion. So you can see here, this is, this should be one sentence, one single sentence. So what I'm doing here, I'm just giving a simple list. The researcher did a number of things. What are those? Created their hypothesis, then conducted some tests, and then drew their conclusion. 3 things. So this list of things that were being done by the researcher, I'm talking about that list. So what I'm doing, I'm using a simple sentence here. By simple sentence, you can see each of these sentences, you'll find only one subject and verb combination or pairing, and that is called independent clause. Only one independent clause is there in all these sentences to give concise direction. Whenever we want to give direction or we give direction, we should always use, or we normally use, what? Simple sentence. Turn to the table number 1 in the appendix. Again, simple instruction I'm giving. So I am using a simple sentence because one independent clause is there. To ask a questions also we should be using simple sentence. We should not be using a compound sentence or complex sentence or compound complex sentence to ask a question, because again that will create confusion. So these are the usage of simple sentences. These are the occasions, or these are the instances where we should be using simple sentences. Now, if we know about this kind of usage, what will happen when we write something, our meaning, we would be able to convey our meaning in a much more clear manner and direct manner. So that's why it's important. Now let's see the other kind of sentences, like what are the functions of other kind of sentences. Means compound, complex and compound complex sentence. For which purposes do we use them? To combine similar ideas. So when we are dealing with more than one ideas and we want to combine them, you can see what we have to do. We can use a compound sentence or complex sentence also. Both these 3 kind of sentences we can use. Now you can see here, recycling is an effective way of helping the environment and everyone should recycle at home. So 2 ideas I am combining here, right? One is I am saying that recycling is a good thing. Another idea that I am conveying here in this sentence is that everyone should recycle at home. So what I am doing, I am combining this. Now how am I combining them? I am combining them in a compound sentence. Now compound sentence means what? You will find 2 independent clauses joined by a what? Coordinating conjunction. So you can see recycling is an effective way of helping the environment. This is one IC independent clause and it is being joined by a coordinating conjunction. Everyone should recycle at home. This is another independent clause. 2 independent clauses joined by what? One coordinating conjunction. So to combine similar ideas. Now we can use complex sentence also to combine similar ideas. So instead of using a coordinating conjunction, I would be using a subordinating conjunction or other kind of conjunction. You can see, since recycling is an effective way of helping the environment, everyone should recycle at home. Again, 2 ideas I am combining, but I am using it Like I am turning one clause into a dependent clause and another remains an independent clause. So one dependent clause, one independent clause joined by a subordinating conjunction. What is the example? Complex sentence. Similarly, the same thing we can do to combine similar, we can combine similar ideas by using compound complex sentence. So you can see, since recycling is an effective way of helping the environment, everyone should recycle at home. We can all work together to protect our planet. So I have to add one extra clause because compound complex sentence, it requires 3 clause, minimum 3 clause, 2 independent, 1 dependent. Now you can see this one is the dependent clause and remaining 2 are the example of independent clause. So that's why it's compound complex sentence. To compare or contrast ideas. So when we want to compare between or to contrast between 2 different ideas also, we can use all these 3 kind of sentences: compound, complex and compound complex sentence. So you can see one, I will just explain about the compound sentence. So Van Gogh was a talented and successful artist, but he had intense personal issues. It's a compound sentence. Now please pause the video and try to find out what are the clauses first and why am I calling it as a compound sentence. Okay, so I hope you got the answers. So let's see. You can see there are 2 clauses. There is hardly any doubt on that. Van Gogh was a talented and successful artist. You can see this is one clause. Another clause is he had intense personal issues. So what is happening here? You can see one independent clause, or both of them are actually independent clause. Van Gogh was a talented artist and successful artist. This is one independent clause. And another one is he had intense personal issues, independent clause. We are joining them by but. So that's why it's a compound sentence. Similarly, complex sentence, you can see it's joined by subordinating conjunction instead of a coordinating conjunction here. So compound complex also, you will find that 2 independent clauses are there and there are at least one subordinate dependent clause. So you have to remember this to compare or contrast between ideas. Now next thing is to convey cause and effect or chain of events. So if we are talking about a cause and effect thing, or if we want to convey or explain a chain of events kind of thing, then also we can use these 3 kind of sentences. So again, just see the compound sentence. The researcher didn't come to the correct conclusion. So they restructured the hypothesis. So you can say I'm talking about cause and effect, and also you can say chain of events. What happens, like sequence of events. So I am using what? Compound sentence. I join them by using a coordinating conjunction. These are 2 independent clauses. Similarly, same thing I can say by using a complex sentence. Complex sentence means one dependent clause would be there. Since the researcher didn't come to the correct conclusion, this is one dependent clause. They restructured the hypothesis. This is independent clause. You can see this is the conjunction. So this thing is also important. Similarly, compound and complex also you can find there are 2 independent clauses and one independent, minimum 1 independent clause. Like 2 independent clause, there would be 2 IC minimum and 1 DC. Fine. So to convey cause and effect, to elaborate on a claim or extend reasoning. So when we want to elaborate on a claim or we want to extend our reasoning also, what we do? We use this kind of sentence, compound sentence. Cell phone should not be permitted in the class for they distract students and teachers. So this is, you can say I am elaborating the reasoning. I am giving some elaborate reasoning, so I can use compound sentence here. Since cell phone distracts students and teachers, they should not be used in the class. Again, same thing I am telling, I am extending a reasoning, but I am using a complex sentence here. Similarly, the same thing again. I can extend the reasoning by using a compound complex sentence also. Since cell phones distract students and teachers, they should not be used in class, and I encourage faculty to forbid their use. See. So you can see here this I was talking about, right? I did inform you guys that we normally do not use compound and complex sentence. Why? Because you can understand from this sentence. These 2 sentences is actually conveying the idea in a much more precise manner, right? In a compact way. But these sentences, this particular sentence seems to be unnecessarily lengthy. And it can sometime at times create confusion also among readers or among the audience. So that's why I said we normally should not be using it. Once in a while is fine when it is absolutely unavoidable, but otherwise we should avoid using compound complex sentence. So this was all. Now let's see the summary, like what are the takeaway points of this lecture. So from this lecture, we got to know about definition and different components of a sentence. So we got a clear understanding about sentences and their different components. And then we got to know about types of sentences as per their function. And also we got to know about, this is the most important thing, sentences, like types of sentences by structures. Like according to the structure, how many types of sentences are there. So you could understand that there are 4 types of sentences: simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, and compound complex sentences. So we also got to know about clauses and their roles. What is clause and how clause actually define the nature of the sentence, what kind of sentence it is. So these are the basic takeaway from points from today's lecture. I hope you understood all the concept pretty well, and I urge you guys, or I request you guys to practice as much as possible, because sentence is very important. If we get a clear understanding about sentence, we can become a good communicator, be it in written form or in oral form. So this is the reference that I have used in order to compile the PPT. So thank you everyone for joining me. See you again in the next lecture. Thank you.